Great to be here. And Paul, thanks for that introduction. And thank you for the faith you've shown in the 3 books. And Korky, if you're watching, I know Korky may be watching from Greece, but Korky Paul is illustrator. If you're not familiar with Korky's work, check out some of these things. Winnie the Witch is a brilliant illustrator, and I'm so pleased that he's been on board for this particular project. And also Martin Chatterton, who's done the covers for all 3. And as Paul said, we've had a year of poems. Little did I know when we all started this, when lockdown started, and suddenly I had nothing to do, as in I had nowhere to go on a daily basis, as in schools and things like that. I started writing the poems, mainly because Chris Riddell was doing a drawing a day. I thought maybe I should do that. And it turned into that book, and of course, this book, which is the book we're going to feature tonight. So, 1 year, 3 books. And also, it's been a very productive year because I've done an album as well, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on, if I may. But yeah, so Pig's Ear, Dog's Dinner. I'm not going to read all the poems. I'm going to sort of stick to a broadly chronological journey through. And so we'll start with the first poem in the book. And it's called The Jolly Man Who Doesn't Like Bad News. I think you might know who I'm talking about. The bearer of bad tidings, not who he wants to be. The teller of home truths, it's not him, honestly. The facts he really wants to share, he like to pick and choose. He's the jolly man who doesn't like bad news. He'll talk around the houses and up the garden path. He will not give straight answers to the questions that are asked. Deflect it all with platitudes disguised as heartfelt views. The jolly man who doesn't like bad news. He'll shy away from action, avoid all confrontation, try to appease and please, or bluff and hesitation. Harsh decisions make us vote. He can't afford to lose. The jolly man who doesn't like bad news. No chance for jocularity or comments off the cuff. Not what he really wants when it comes to PMQs. Cliched and all a mass to cover up the fluster and the bluffing, inaction and distraction, hints, half-truths and clues. The jolly man, the folly man without a plan. The jolly man who doesn't like bad news. And if you didn't know, it's a wonderful illustration by Mr. Korky Paul there, to give you a bit of a clue who it might be about. Anyway, this poem started, this production, this product, this project started off as a diary. Book 1, book 2, book 3, and I thought I ought to address that in one of the poems. This is simply called Dear Diary. I tried to think of some of the famous diarists and diaries I could think of, and then reference them. Dear Diary. Samuel Pepys didn't make his rhyme, so why am I trying to do that with mine? Anne hid hers from Nazi gun and tank. Mine, I'm just being, to use the word, dork. But I write what I want in the way that I talk. I may be wimpy, no longer a kid. Cheap jokes and puns, to you, 10 quid. Adrian Mole was really a woman. If that's true here, who saw that coming? So, moving swiftly on, this next poem is called Is It Too Early for a Chocky Biscuit? And for a lot of us, when we were during lockdown, you were stuck in the house, you went for your 1 walk a day and you got into those routines, and the temptation was to start eating chocolate biscuits really early. Hence this poem with another fantastic illustration by Korky there. Anyway, this is called Is It Too Early for a Chocky Biscuit? Tea. I've won at the kettle, how can I resist it? The only nagging question, is it still too early to have a chocky biscuit? I've answered all my messages, of which there was one. answered my work emails too, namely, none. What to do right now then? One option, should I list it, is that nagging question: is it still too early to have a chalky biscuit? I could choose a healthy snack from the fruit bowl, seldom touched. Try an apple every day, thank you very much. Start a carton of fresh juice, take the top and twist it. But still that nagging question: is it still too early to have a chalky biscuit? Or make myself a smoothie with strawberries and bananas and run the risk of fruit stains down the front of my pajamas? It may just be a chance that's slim, but I'd rather that I missed it. And then there is a question: is it still too early to have a chalky biscuit? Kettle on, resistance gone. I just couldn't hack it. A cup of tea is far too wet without at least a packet. Hobnob's choice, or something like that. Oh, go on, I'll risk it. It isn't just a question, more of a suggestion. Sod the indigestion. It never is too early to have a chocolate biscuit, as I'm sure you'll agree. And it seems appropriate to follow that poem with a poem about a cup of tea, because that's how most days start. Apart from the few days where I've been working, going into schools and things like that, most days have started with me getting up, having a cup of tea, looking at the news, looking at my notebook, writing a poem, putting it online, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, looking at your fantastic responses and feeling good about the day. Cuppa. The first cup of tea in the morning is always the best. Mum always says that, and she's right. Sets you up for the day. Milk, no sugar. Hope in a favourite mug. Doesn't really taste of anything, but still a proper brew. As a child, before the advent of tea bags, tea leaves were the stuff of nightmares as they festooned and swirled. So I never, ever drank right to the bottom of the cup, in case they invaded my infant mouth like tiny mutant tadpoles. A habit that still continues today. So I drink most of it and swill the rest away, and think of Mum and Dad and what each new day may bring. I've really enjoyed the challenge of writing a poem each day, and obviously you try and respond to some things that happen. Some things are a personal diary, I'll come to that a bit later, but some things happen, whether it's to do with COVID or just general news, or in some cases, people passing away. And on 2 consecutive days, Bobby Ball passed away and Nobby Stiles passed away. I wrote poems about both of them. I'll come back to Bobby Ball in a moment, but Nobby Stiles, obviously a World Cup hero, and I had the pleasure of meeting him once at an event for the National Football Museum, and he was a really, really nice bloke. And I met him at the Football Museum. I think it was the Hall of Fame event, and I ended up standing next to him in the gents. Well, I'm not sure that's how I got his name though. Anyway, this is called Toothless, Not You. We all could be like you, sir, tenacious in the tackle. Get stuck in, you'd muck in, up for every battle. We dreamed of Best and Charlton, but couldn't do what they could do. You gave us hope and glory, toothless, not you. You knew your place and reason, win it, give it, go. A man for every season, dogged little so-and-so. More than just enforcer, example through and through. Ruthless, yes, of course, sir, but toothless, not you. A little bit of Nobby Stiles in everyone who's kicked a ball. The commitment to compete and always give your all. You made us feel that when we play, we could do that too. The engine and the energy, toothless, not you. For club and then for country, the heart and soul of every team or every dream. European champion, a World Cup winner who was an ordinary hero, but toothless, we love and won't forget, forever captured in that jig. You're still dancing yet. The chosen generation, one of the golden few, honest, ever humble, but toothless, not you. Legend, inspiration, the truth that's ever true. The grin we'll all remember, the win we'll all remember. Nobby Styles, you made us smile, but toothless, not you. As I said, Bobby Ball passed away the day before. And when I tweeted a poem about Bobby Ball, and this is the weird thing about Twitter, you never know who you're going to interact with. And it was retweeted by the singer-songwriter Badly Drawn Boy, who I've always been a fan of. And so we started having a little Twitter chat. And he then tweeted something coming up to Remembrance Day. And I ended up writing a poem, and I sent it to him privately first, and he said, will you share it? So this is the poem I shared around about Remembrance Day. And I'm going to read what he actually tweeted and what the actual inspiration was. He said, my dad was 2 or 3 when his father was killed in World War II. They recovered his wallet with a letter which had a hole through it. He'd been stabbed with a bayonet, and the letter said, how's little Rick? My dad, Badly Drawn Boy's dad. I can't remember what he looks like. So this idea of a letter that was never sent with a hole in it where the bayonet went through, I thought was very powerful. And it turned into this very short poem called The Last Post. A letter from the trenches, from a man I never met. A letter never sent, and a German bayonet. There's a hole inside my heart as I think about it yet. The letter pierced and torn by a German bayonet. Those written words live on, lest ever we forget. A letter stained with horror from a German bayonet. Forever left its mark, such sorrow and regret. A letter from my grandfather and a German bayonet. One of the questions I always get asked when I'm going around schools, now started to go around schools again, and that started to happen again since that half term. I've visited a few, and it's been really good to get back on the road and back in front of an audience. I enjoy doing this, but there's nothing that beats actually having people in front of you, whether they're joining in with a poem or laughing or responding. And I love the silence after a poem as well. So you're getting that response, whereas I'm just talking to a screen, hoping there are people out there listening. And, you know, I know that if this poem you don't like, that's okay. You can mute it, go and get a cup of tea and come back. And there's one that you're going to be liking in a few moments' time. And that's the beauty of this. But one of the questions I always get asked is, what was the first poem you ever wrote? And up to about 6 months ago, my answer was, I don't know. It was probably something about autumn, an acrostic, A-U-T-U-M-N, or red is the colour of it. It'd be something I wrote at school. And I mentioned this lady before, Mrs. Burton, Joan, I've got to call her now, but to me, she's always Mrs. Burton because she was my primary school teacher, and she's made a habit of commenting on a lot of the poems, almost on a sort of daily or weekly basis. And I love the fact that I'm nearly 60 and my teacher is still giving me marks. It's brilliant. And I've been really encouraged by her, not just her comments, but everybody's comments. It's been really uplifting. And thank you for all those. It's been absolutely brilliant. But I remember posting something about a topic book I'd done when I was at school, and I posted a picture of it, and with the childish drawings of fish and creatures and a boat and stuff like that. Anyway, a few days later, I got a message from Mrs. Burton, Joan, hope you're out there, and she sent me this poem. And this poem I wrote when I was 10 years old, and she kept it in a school anthology. And I've not changed it at all. So none of the words have been changed since I was 10 years old. So this poem is 50 years old and was the first poem I wrote and the first poem that was ever published as well. And now it's in here. It's called Windmills. One day I saw a windmill there, in a field of tulips fair. The tulips, they belong to farms, and the windmills all have swinging arms. In a field bright and gay, one windmill seemed to say, how I wish the wind would stop, my sails are spinning like a top. The sails are spinning in the breeze, the miller grinds the corn with ease, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, that's the way the windmills go. The sails go merrily whirling round, sometimes nearly touching the ground. All of them belong to farms, those windmills with their swinging arms. Like I say, not been changed since I was 10 years old, exactly as I wrote it. And I'm pleased that Korky actually chose that one to do a picture of. So I can show you the picture there. And I don't know if Korky's trying to make that look like me. But anyway, yeah, Windmills, the first poem I ever wrote. Still talking of Korky, I'm going to show you the drawing for this next one. And I'm also going to give a shout out to another friend of mine, a man called Nick Totchek, who's a poet, who I couldn't remember where the pun had come from. I knew I'd heard it from somewhere. And I was talking to Nick, he said, well, that's one of my poems. And it was the last line. And it's called An Englishman's Comb is His Hassle. And I love that. And you might guess who it's about. But that line only features in the title of the poem. An Englishman's comb is his hassle. Thanks to Nick Totchek. Here's the poem. The state of the nation is one situation we shouldn't be willing to rush, but something more pressing is really distressing. Let's buy Boris a brush. It's wild and it's woolly, which sums him up fully and won't stay in place with a push. Divided, whatever, let's all pull together and buy poor Boris a brush. A life of its own, it seems to have grown like a mutating alien bush, unkempt and uncared for, unstatesmanlike, therefore, let's buy Boris a brush. Unlike the election, there's every direction that's causing his centre to blush. It's left and it's right, like a fright in the night. Let's buy Boris a brush. Monstrous and raving, loony behaving, worse than screaming or such. Looks like the child catcher, he now needs a Thatcher. Let's buy Boris a brush. Entirely fitting, he could have been sitting near a lavatory waiting to flush. Like one for the toilet, don't spoil it or soil it. Let's buy Boris a brush. Hair gel or Brill cream mixed up with Vaseline won't tame this mane very much, won't keep it in place, a state of disgrace. Let's buy Boris a brush. And this seems to carry on from this one, really. It's called Prepare Ye the Way. Like training for a marathon with a wander in your slippers, or fighting Tyson Fury in your Union Jack knickers. Going for Olympic gold with a diet based on pies, playing truth or dare with a habit based on lies. Be a World Cup winning manager because you once played FIFA, pretending to be Jesus because you like eggs at Easter. Publishing a novel because the title's rather spiffing, the pages are all blank and the detail has gone missing. A Eurovision entry when you've got half a verse. West End centre stage without having to rehearse. You've only got a wooden spoon, yet think you are Nigella. Stirring up big issues when you're just a programme seller. Trying to win on Strictly because you once danced the conga, drunken at the back of the line that's getting longer. You think you're indestructible, just like Captain Scarlet. A knight without a sword shouting, have at thee, you varlet. Cramming for exams with last-minute skim reading in the knowledge that you've got a job thanks to genes and breeding. Front page news when there isn't any story. Minimum effort and maximum glory. Shouting slogans to a crowd trying to be heard. All this time and still you're unprepared. Turning every drama into a downright farce. The higher that a monkey climbs, the more it shows its arse. This one I wrote, I think it was the 2nd of January. Well, it is the 2nd of January according to the date in here. And And I thought January and February were very bleak months, because you've had the disappointment of Christmas and not seeing everybody. You'd had that sort of time in the autumn where it was almost getting back to normal, and then we're back into lockdown again, and then suddenly it's post-Christmas and you've got the dark nights, there's no work. It was a really depressing time. And then you've got all these people who are saying it isn't true. All you COVID non-believers, truth deniers and deceivers, doing just as you please, selfish to the last. All you so-called free thinkers, fact ignorers, truth tinkers, just remove those narrow blinkers. Is that too much to ask? All you who just want to see theories of conspiracy with no responsibility, playing loose and fast. All you fools with no compliance, Facebook posts your sole reliance. Know much more than all the science, just don't make me laugh. All you keyboard ranting hacks, experts who don't follow facts, shouting loudest from the back, false news that you pass. All you selfish rule breakers, frauds, fools, risk takers, half-baked theory maker fakers, time to face the facts. If not for you, then for others, or respect for one another. It might just help someone recover. Please just wear a mask. Yeah. Anyway, as I said, this started off as a little project, just to fill the time. And you can't write the same poem every day about how disappointing the government have been, or how ill people are. You find different ways of writing. And there's a line that appears at the end of this poem, which was said by somebody. I think it might have been Shirley Smith, who was a friend of my parents, and again has commented on a regular basis. And I just thought that line sums up what I want to do. This poem's called On Reflection. This started off as something to fill the time that had been taken away, time performing, working, travelling, and suddenly time at home. It began as a quirky habit, a little response to circumstances, handwritten in a sketchbook and shared here and there, like the daily cartoons of Mr. Riddell. A poetic response, a pun or a joke, at first for a few, and then it grew and grew and grew. This quirky habit became routine, poetic daily exercises, literal push-ups and circuits, encouraged by an online community, encouraged by your online community. One audience was lost, another audience was found and cherished. Immediate and inspiring. More than just exercise now, a daily committal, and the fear of missing a day in case I should just stop. I keep thinking, but what if there's nothing to write about? But there always is. The gift that keeps on giving. And here we are. Here we all are, still. 3 volumes later, and I've not run out of words. So we will continue onwards and upwards, this poetic communion, this breaking of breakfast together. One of you once wrote, "Your diary is our diary." I love that phrase. Your diary is our diary. Poets are merely mirrors, and all poetry is but reflection. And it's said in the poem there, 3 volumes later. So we've done 3 volumes. I say we've had the first 2 here. So we've got a year of poetry. And we were going to end it there. But then we did a bit of working out. And we worked out that if we carried on till the so-called Freedom Day, that would take me up to about poem 500. Those of you who follow me on Facebook know that I did miscount at some point, but we did get to poem 500. And so I can show you the cover of the next book, which is going to be called Nail on the Head. And also, I mean, that comes from, again, so many of your comments, and I can't thank you enough for the comments that you give on a daily basis. It's brilliant. It's really encouraging. But the idea that, you know, most people have said at some point, Paul, you've hit the nail on the head. You're saying what worth it in your diary's our diary. And the original idea was to go back to Chris Riddell and have him illustrate it. He started it. He could finish it. But then we thought, and I know it only says Chris on there, but the plan now, which has been agreed by Chris and Martin Chatterton and Korky, is they're going to do a third each. So the 3 illustrators have been involved in each individual book. They're going to be involved in the last book, which I think is really, really exciting. And to me, draws a line underneath it all. And if somebody had told me when all this started, and I must admit, I remember sending an email to Paul, and I must apologise because I think it was probably a very cursory email. I wasn't expecting a response. It was like, dear Paul, Henry almost passed your name on. Hope you don't mind me contacting you. I'm a poet. I usually write poems for kids. I've been doing these poems for adults on a daily basis. I wonder if you're interested. And it was literally, you know, as brief as that. And I sent him a bit of bio, and I sent him the poems. And that was, I remember it was a Thursday morning. And the Thursday afternoon, he emailed back and said, Paul, thanks for the email. Get in touch. Ring me on Monday. And it was the day after Father's Day. I remember sitting in my little den outside, ringing him up, and Paul said, yeah, let's do a book. And here we are. 3rd book, 4th book on the way. It'll be the 4th in the series and will be the last. I hope it's not the last book I do with Paul, but it'll be the last in this particular series. And as I said in the poem, you're trying to find something to write about each day, and you can't write the same thing each day. Much as you might be grumpy, or much as you might be disillusioned with everybody and everything, so you find things to write about. I remember it was a winter's day, and a little girl was with her mum, and led to this poem, very gentle little poem called Today is a Day for Unicorn Hats. I'm just going to move the light a little bit because, yeah, we can see the words a little bit better now. I'm out of my age. The little girl and the unicorn hat skips in purple sparkly wellies and is oblivious to the world, holding hands with her mummy and jumping in puddles is her entire universe right now. The years that lie ahead may be laden with worries, seriousness, or sadness, but that is not for now. Today is not a word, sorry, today is not a day for words like pandemic or impeachment. Today is a day for a unicorn hat, splashing in puddles and laughing. And I like the fact that the poems have started to do lots of things, not just been a diary of the social time that we're in, and obviously reflect that, but other things as well. And I've started to think of the poems a bit like a performance, a bit like a show, in the sense that if I've done 3 rhyming poems, I can't do another one that rhymes. You've got to have a bit of light and shade. Or if you've done 3, political poems, you've got to have something that's not political, or just change it. So I've started to think about that, and it's been really interesting from a poetical point of view, from a writing point of view, as how to approach that. And I've really enjoyed that challenge. Sometimes the poems come easily, trajectory from A to B. Sometimes words flow readily, almost as easy as 1, 2, 3. A gift of a headline, a minister's quote, a pun in waiting, an obvious joke. The lines, the rhymes fall into place. The punchline binds its time and waits. Yes, sometimes the poems come easily. Sometimes words flow readily, and other times they don't. Which is how it works, isn't it? Sometimes I've written haikus, usually on a day when I'm busy, because a haiku is dead short to write. But what I love about haikus as well is, if you don't know what a haiku is, it's a poem of 17 syllables, 575. I always say this, but my favourite haiku ever is by the wonderful John Cooper Clarke, and his haiku is this: to convey one's mood in 17 syllables is very difficult. Anyway, yeah, this was a haiku I wrote on the 20th of the 1st. Trump, the man who followed through. Your legacy, a skid mark on the underpants of democracy. It's all intellectual stuff, isn't it, really? And then we go from that to this. In the face of crisis, the pressure unrelenting, against all odds, you do your job. Life in your hands, death at your fingertips, against all odds, you do your job. You watch hopes rise and then watch them fall, and against all odds, you do your job. You carry the weight of us all, your own burden even heavier, and against all odds, you do your job. You are tired, yet do not sleep. Weary, yet carry on. Against all odds, you do your job. And when you cry for everyone. Against all odds, you do your job. Your mortuaries are filling and your hearts are draining. Against all odds, you do your job. You do what has to be done because it simply has to be done. Against all odds, you do your job. And this is a poem inspired by a speech that probably most of us saw on TV on the inauguration of President Biden. And it's called When Poetry Ruled the World. On a day when free speech returned, poetry ruled the world. On a day when history happened, poetry spoke for the world. After years of meaningless words, words of hate, division, confusion, came words of healing, words of hope, words of light and inclusion. Words that dare to reach out in love, rooted in the past, but growing towards a future, seeds of inspiration. Words of harmony, not harm, wondrous, not wounding, words of flame and unafraid, beautiful and brave, the voice of youth that voiced the thoughts of all ages, the voice of a minority that spoke for a majority, and not for the first time, the voice that spoke out loud and proud had a dream and dared to dream that dream for all to hear. The voice of one that spoke for many. Amanda Gorman, thank you for your words when poetry ruled the world. Okay, now there's a little poem I've missed out, which I'm going to try and find if I can find the right page for it. And it's even if I can't find the right page, I'll tell you the story, because it's about Des O'Connor, and it's called A Little Less Sunshine. And again, going back to what I said before about sometimes you tweet something. I wrote this poem about Des O'Connor, A Little Less Sunshine. And yeah, and it was retweeted, and then it was thanked by his daughter. So Des O'Connor's daughter actually sort of said thank you for the poem, which was lovely, because who'd have thought that you'd have been you know, interacting with something like that. And one of the things I remember about Des O'Connor, obviously it mentions in the poem, and you know, it looks like I'm not going to be able to find this one. I mean, if I flick through, oh, here we are, A Little Less Sunshine. There we go. Your name, once synonymous with rubbish, thanks to your biggest fans. Des, short for desperate. You embraced it all, became part of the joke, laughed it all up, consummate professional. In an age where light entertainment has become cliche and parody, or even an insult, You had it all. A song, a dance, a joke, a smile. It wasn't just star quality that drew the audience in, it was warmth. That and lack of ego made us love you all the more. And for over 50 years, you only brought us sunshine. And as I said, I tweeted it, and Des O'Connor's daughter said, thank you for tweeting this, and sort of retweeted it. And I just think it's interesting how social media works, that there's a lot of negativity, but sometimes it's positive. And I remember seeing Eric Morecambe on Pebble Mill at 1, on those days when you're allowed to watch the telly at lunchtime, or if you're off school, you'd watch Pebble Mill at 1, which was like a magazine program. It was like nationwide, but at lunchtime. And you'd have a musical act on, and often a comedian. And Eric Morecambe had actually done a children's book. I think it was called The Reluctant Vampire, about a vampire who didn't like blood. He liked tomato sauce and Vimto and stuff like that, or fruit juice, but didn't like blood. And the interviewer said, "It's very funny, Eric, but I'm very confused about this particular character." And Eric Morecambe said, "Oh, which character is that?" He said, "Oh, there's this character. There's a minstrel called Ranoko said." He said, "That's a funny name." And Eric Morecambe said, "Well, just read it out." And the passage he read out was something like this. And Ranoko said was a minstrel. He loved to travel the country, singing songs and trying to entertain people. Unfortunately, the people in the country didn't like him singing songs and didn't find him entertaining, or worse, to that effect. And so the interviewer said, "Why Ranoko said?" Of course, it's Des O'Connor, isn't it? But I just love that little story. Anyway, talking of sunshine, swiftly on, and as if this had been planned and linked. This isn't, strictly speaking, a poem that I wrote this year, but it was an unpublished poem, and I did sort of stage manage the fact that I knew these books were coming out. So I thought, there are certain poems I'd like to get in print that haven't been in print yet, that aren't for children. And that this one was inspired by the sort of email you get from travel companies. And I travelled abroad from Doncaster Airport, the Robin Hood Airport, Robin Hood, that well-known aviator. And so my name was on the system, and I got an email from Doncaster Airport, and the heading on the email said, "Sunshine escapes from Doncaster." I may have put the emphasis in the wrong place there, but they were the words, "Sunshine escapes from Doncaster." And I thought, how true. Here's the poem. Just one chance is all it takes. The clouds collide, it makes its break. The sunshine makes its great escape. You could not plan it faster. It's begun, there goes the sun escaping from Doncaster. Sunshine escapes from Doncaster is what the brochure says. This lack of shine, not the best line to sell these dark and dreary days. The monochrome metropolis with 50 shades of greys. Certainly no sizzle, no happy ever after. It's all wrong, the sunshine's gone escaping from Doncaster. No time for topping up the tan, don't get out the caravan. Every woman, every man with skin like alabaster. It's no fun, there goes the sun escaping from Doncaster. Sunshine escapes from Doncaster, no taking in the rays. It's gone to find the nicer climes on which to brightly blaze. The sun has put his hat on and gone on holidays. There's no hips and no hoorays. It's cooler than Alaska, because I was running out of rhymes. -1 without the sun, escaping from Doncaster. Goodbye Yorkshire, time to go. Say hello to Mexico. Silly Donny, don't know, best go to Madagascar. On the run, the convict son escaping from Doncaster. Sunshine escapes from Doncaster on a daily basis. There's now to put a smile upon those pallid Yorkshire faces, eternally nocturnal, just one of those places, the land that time forgets, a natural disaster. Shadows long, no light upon, no sunshine shone, the sunshine's gone, all said and done, it's farewell sun, escaping from Doncaster. I hope you joined in, because if you're at a live show, that's what I'll be expecting you to do. It's not often you can join in the word Doncaster as part of a performer's poem and chorus. Discussing politics online is never a good thing, and because it just doesn't work. But what I have noticed, and again, I've tried to sort of stay, as non-political as I can, as in party political, although it's difficult not to be with the disappointments we've had from the government in charge. But what I have noticed is the socialist left, for want of a better term, always seem to take the moral high ground, as in their principles seem to be more important than everybody else's principles. And I've been involved in a couple of discussions with people, and, you know, ended up in this poem called "Just Because You're on the Left Doesn't Mean You're Always Right." Right wing means extremism, but it's different on the left. Principles, core values more important than the rest. Justice always on your side, you're fighting the good fight. Just because you're on the left doesn't mean you're always right. No compromise, you stick with what you think, but others have to compromise when you won't budge an inch. Ignoring double standards as you bark and bite. Just because you're on the left doesn't mean you're always right. Then an even bigger picture, two sides to every story. You can't just hate somebody because they voted Tory. It's not a case of wrong or right. It's never black or white. Just because you're on the left doesn't mean you're always right. Too middle ground, too soft, too tough, too weak to be electable. You just change your stereotypes for ones you deem acceptable. He wears a suit, stands by a flag, a sir who's erudite. And just because you're on the left doesn't mean you're always right. You'd rather fight amongst yourselves than join and win as one. Rather be a footnote than a chapter new begun. Blinkered by self-righteousness and blinded by your light. Just because you're on the left doesn't mean you're always right. You say you want democracy, but is that really true? You won't accept and won't agree with those opposing you. You think you have the moral ground and look down from your height. Just because you're on the left doesn't mean you're always right. A broad church and broad brushstrokes, that's the here and now. The devil's in the detail, they'll make it there somehow. Don't dwell on past failures when the future ain't so bright. Just because you're on the left doesn't mean you're always right. Reclaim the middle ground that's lost, build up the trust from there. Changes one step at a time, not halt and about turn. Don't shoot yourselves in the foot, be long-term with your sight. Just because you're on the left doesn't mean you're always right. If there is an enemy, it's not the one within. Shooting down your own will never be the way to win. Democracy is numbers cast each election night. And just because you're on the left doesn't mean you're always right. Anyway, I started to do a lot more events like this throughout this time, and events in schools. I say in schools from this back bedroom here. This has been my performance space, and it's weird trying to get ready for it. You think you'd be comfortable in your own home, and I am comfortable performing. But the title of this poem is "I Just Can't Seem to Do It in My Slippers." So even though I'm here in my own home, upstairs in a bedroom, I've got to wear shoes. Once or twice, when I've had slippers on, it just felt weird performing with slippers on. So hence this poem. Home time, showtime looming. My back bedroom zooming. Strange but true, my secret tip is, with high energy poetry, something awkward seems to be, I just can't seem to do it in my slippers. Truth be told, I have to choose Converse or some indoor shoes. Feeling different, I just get the jitters. Feeling somewhat incomplete, without substantial on my feet, I just can't seem to do it in my slippers. They may be comfy, maybe warmer, too casual for a performer. Perhaps I need to find some winkle pickers or something like them that would gauge the feeling that I'm on the stage. I just can't seem to do it in my slippers. A change of shirt before I start. Check that I just look the part. Check my trousers, buttons and my zippers. Never thought I would be taxing. Just a case of too relaxing. I just can't seem to do it in my slippers. Try as I might. Something doesn't feel quite right. Like playing football in a frogman's flippers. What you see when I'm on show, you never know what's down below. I just can't seem to do it in my slippers. So Zoom or Teams or Google Meet, you will never see my feet, even if they smell like last week's kippers. Perpetuate an illusion, but it is my one conclusion. It may seem nothing to it, only me who knew it. You hadn't got a clue it was a secret and I blew it, but I just can't seem to do it in my slippers. And I've got my Converse on tonight, which, I could bend down and show you, but of a certain age, if I bend down, I'm not going to get back up again. And this poem sort of goes with that, because obviously you're looking at me and it's in the top half. And we've all seen those stories of people who've been, Zooming in their pajamas or their pants or whatever, and they've been found out. And so the poem is called A Reason to Put My Trousers On. following on from the slippers. Most days are pyjama days. No reason to head out at all. Not so splendid isolation stuck inside the same four walls. But today I have a meeting, a Zoom at 1:30, giving me a reason to put my trousers on. Another day I didn't shave, not going out to work. Another day in slippers and the same old shirt. A Google meeting in a school, best not get it wrong, giving me a reason to put my trousers on. The bookcase right behind me, in my back bedroom, it's only head and shoulders when it's Teams or Zoom. But I don't want to stand up, shocking everyone, giving me a reason to put my trousers on. I'm watching too much football now and all sorts of sports, but it doesn't mean I have to walk around in shorts. No one needs to see my knees or cast their gaze upon, giving me a reason to put my trousers on. No one needs to see my socks, given half a chance. Even less than that when it comes to underpants. Should I choose the white fronts or that purple thong, giving me a reason to put my trousers on? I point out, on one level, I do have the white fronts, although that was because my very first ever children's book was called The Amazing Captain Concord, a superhero with big red underpants and a plastic nose. And in fact, I've got a plastic nose here. And I remember somebody had bought me one plastic nose. I thought I could use that as a children's prop in schools. I used to put it on and become Captain Concord in front of the whole assembly, and then put these underpants on. And I went to a shop in Retford, and it was, it's not there anymore, but it's like, imagine a shop that's for people older than the demographic of Greenwoods, right? It was that type of shop, older shop. And I went in and I said, can I have the biggest pair of red underpants you've got, please? And this guy said, what are you, Superman or something? I said, to be honest, it's something like that. And I told him the story about, about the character I got. He said, well, they're not making red white fronts anymore. Do you want to buy all the pairs I've got? I said, how many have you got? He went, 5. It should be $4.99 each. You can have them for 99p each. I said, will you do me a receipt? He said, why? So I can claim them against me tax. So I did. I claimed 4 pairs of underpants against me tax. Also, I only had the one nose at the time, the one nose, as it were, right? And my wife's mother and father went to Skegness for the day. I said, look, if you go to a joke shop, if you see any noses in the joke shop, buy me some. We got a phone call, obviously, not the days of mobile phones. It was a pay phone. And they said, oh, we found some. How many do you want? I said, I don't know. Get me all of them. Get me 5, get me 6, get me 10. And we came back. Said, we bought you 5. And the man said, 5? I've never sold 5 before. What do you want them for? And my mother-in-law said, oh, it's my son. He's in show business. What a lovely phrase that was, anyway. So this is show business, is it? Anyway, as I said, what I've been trying to do, as well as look at the news, is look at what's happening, any special occasions. And I did find out one particular week, it was National Pie Week, the beginning of March, which gave me an excuse to write various odes to the pie, because this is a multi-verse poem called I've Always Been a Pie Sort of Guy. I've always been a pie sort of guy. It doesn't matter how hard I may try. My trust is in the crust and the pastry that is puffed and the filling that is guaranteed to satisfy. I've always been a pie sort of guy, a fact my waistline just cannot defy. Ingredients terrific and oh so calorific, all the things I just cannot deny. I've always been a pie sort of guy, as my taste buds all will testify. Gloriously flavoury and gravy, oh so savoury, causing senses to intensify, because I've always been a pie sort of guy, as the words of this verse will signify. The beauty and the bake and the kidney and the steak, a taste of which we all can just rely, because I've always been a pie sort of guy. No mincing of my words will now apply. The faith and the belief in everything that's beef, the relief of demand and then supply. I've always been a pie sort of guy, like a giant I fee and foe and fie. Aroma so distinctive, to me it's just instinctive. Who could just resist it? No, not I. I've always been a pie sort of guy, And I spy with my little eye that even now the vegan is now well worth receiving, not averse to then diversify. I've always been a pie sort of guy, the appeal of which let nobody decry. I'll talk and then I'll talk of the jelly and the pork, those blessings while they all just multiply. Because I've always been a pie sort of guy, no mystery to demystify. Potato, meat or chicken, the pot will always thicken, my pulse will always quicken, my oh my. And lots of people seem to question why. Why it is that I would glorify this genius combination, this simple taste sensation, because I've always been a pie sort of guy. And again, a fantastic illustration by Mr. Korky Paul there. I love that. And I love the fact that even though we didn't started off thinking these books were going to be illustrated, they've been illustrated by three of my favourite illustrators in Chris Riddell, Korky and Martin. And I'm really proud of the fact that, you know, it's not just a poetry book, it's a book of art as well. Again, looking through a couple of poems to go, and you know, I did say to Paul, if anybody's got any requests, you can chuck those in if you want. Or if you've got any questions you want to ask, put them in the boxes, and Paul will pass them on to me. And I'm hopeful at some point that this will turn into a tour, and that we can play a poetry lotto or poetry lottery. In fact, I was in a school in Blackpool about 3 weeks ago before the end of term. I got year 8 and 9. And they were great fun. And the last 10 minutes, they were asking questions. They were talking about what I've been writing. That's what I write these poems. And and because they're a good audience, I said, look, just shout out a date. Shout out any date you want throughout the year. I'll read the poem on that day. So it's like a poetry lottery. I didn't know which they were going to shout out. And what was interesting, fascinating, and slightly worrying at the same time was how relevant some of the older poems still were, in the sense that things hadn't changed that much. But anyway, as I said, I'm hoping that this will turn into a tour. I think that the name of the tour will probably be the name of the final book, the Nail on the Head tour. And so if you've got any venues near you, wherever you are, and you want to put a show on, then we can do that. That'd be great to do, probably back end of this year, maybe beginning of next year. But if you follow me on Facebook, I shall put the information on there. If you've been following me on Facebook, you know that I have been going on a little bit about this. I'm going to show you this again now. This is my album. I say mine. It's called Don Powell's Occasional Flames. Just my cup of tea. And there's me, Don Powell from the Mighty Slade, and my best mate Les Glover there. And Les and myself wrote a few songs a couple of years ago. Did an event with Don in Retford, and said, look, if you record them, would you drum on them? He said, of course I will, lads. He came over and drummed on a couple. And because he was so good, we finished them by lunchtime. He said, have you got anything else? And we said, well, we've got a couple of demos. He said, well, let's do those. So by the end of the day, we've got 4 or 5. I said, that's half an album. And that was our last project called Tape in the Hiss. And then we carried on writing some other songs. And Don said, I've got some lyrics. Perhaps we could use those. I mistakenly thought he had lyrics that were like, I've got a verse and a chorus, I just made a middle 8. What he meant was, I've got a folder with loads of sheets of paper in, or loads of scraps of paper. He sent it over, and there was no complete lyrics at all. But what I did do, and it was fascinating, again, a different way of working. I remember sitting at my table, and I got all the pieces of paper, right? And there must have been about, I don't know, 40, 50 pieces of paper, sometimes like 3 or 4 lines, sometimes just a phrase written. And I started putting them together. And actually, there's 2 or 3 songs on here that have arisen from those scraps of paper. So the way it's worked has been magical. And we started before lockdown. Luckily, Don did his drumming just before lockdown happened. And then Les and myself carried on afterwards. And yeah, this came out officially on the 1st. So 3 books and a CD in a year. And actually, I'm just going to say this, and it's nothing to do with the book, but we have been featured in Classic Rock, 8 out of 10. And also 8 out of 10 in this month's issue of Viva Rock. And in both magazines, we have taken out a half-page advert. There we are. Who'd have thought that when I was a youngster listening to Slade? But yeah, so it's been a fascinating year where I've sort of, I suppose, I've redefined myself as not just a children's poet, but more of a writer for adults in terms of the poems in here and in terms of the music as well. Anyway. Couple more poems and then we're going to finish off. And this one I was looking at news items, and it wasn't a news item I was looking at, but there was something else that was there, and it said that Winston Churchill's slippers were going for like 15 grand. I thought, wow. And that got me thinking. I just like the phrase Winston Churchill slippers. And I just thought, what else could there be an auction? I'm not sure any of these are actually on any sites you could bid for, or indeed you'd want to bid for them. But anyway, that's how it started. Winston Churchill slippers, Margaret Thatcher's toenail clippers, Harold Macmillan's flippers, Tony Blair's panini stickers, Mussolini's loofah, Che Guevara's shaving foam, Adolf Hitler's underpants, Dennis Healy's comb, Hermann Goering's rubber duck, Idi Amin's stickle bricks, Robert Mugabe's foot spar, Clement Attlee's tap shoes, Pinochet's guitar, Lenin's ukulele, Stalin's cricket bat, Arthur Scargill's cummerbund, Gorbachev's cravat, Tony Benn's stringy vest, Edward Heath's boating cap, Harold Wilson's pipe stand, John Major's jockstrap. I shouldn't have written that one. I feel a bit bilious now. Gaddafi's balaclava, Richard Nixon's snooker cue, Jeremy Thorpe's surgical support, Kenneth Clark's corkscrew, Mahatma Gandhi's banjo, the Ayatollah's football socks, Winston Churchill's slippers. I bid and kid you not. Strikes me that most of these sound like bands who would appear on John Peel. That's the new track from Mussolini's loofah there. Anyway, I don't know if that's an impression of John Peel, but I can imagine some of those. Right, I'm going to do 2 more poems, if time allows. And on National Poetry Day, a couple of years ago, the theme was change, I think it was. And I heard this story about a very famous poem, I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, all right, by William Wordsworth. We all know the Daffodils poem. I don't know if you know that William Wordsworth lived with his wife and his sister Dorothy, and Dorothy was quite overbearing and strict, apparently. I've heard this story from 2 sources. One of them is Mike Harding, and one I've read somewhere else anyway. But I heard that the first version that Wordsworth came up with was not I wandered lonely as a cloud, but I wandered lonely as a cow. And then Dorothy had said, well, that's not very poetic, put cloud in instead, and he changed it. But it strikes me, if you're on a field of daffodils on a hill, there's not going to be a cloud on the hill, but you would see a cow on the hill. Anyway, with that in mind, I wrote this called I Wandered Lonely as a Cow. It's to the same tune, basically, but a slightly different subject matter. I wandered lonely as a cow that tramps on high or vales or hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering, dancing in the breeze. Entranced was I by golden glow, their shimmer shining in the sun, hypnotized and drawn, and so I bit their heads off one by one. I know to savour such a taste, I did not waver, did not waste. 10,000 heads that glow no more, 10,000 stalks of naked green, a banquet for this herbivore, a feast of riches seldom seen. An exquisite taste, much more than good, when all these days I chewed on cud. Such extra weight on leg and hoof, I staggered churning from the field. 4 stomachs full, I could scarce move, back to the farm to share my yield. Thus caused the milking maid to utter, I give not milk, but yellow butter. I think I was then told that apparently cows don't eat daffodils. We sort of scuppered that. And in a way, that sort of leads on to the last one. We're going from cows to goats, because there's a story about the goats who overrun Llandudno. And I wrote this poem only for then somebody to tell me that it's not pronounced Llandudno, but Llandudno. Unfortunately, I'm not going to change the rhymes. So it's the wild goats are back on the streets of Llandudno. And before I finish for this bit anyway, can I just say thank you for those of you who've tuned in tonight. Thank you immensely to Paul for publishing, for Korky doing the illustrations, and Martin and Chris for getting involved in the artwork. And for all of you who comment on such a daily basis. It's a joy to be part of this little community and to be part of this little journey. And hopefully we'll see each other face to face and do these poems in a live situation. Anyway, for now, the wild goats are back on the streets of Llandudno. They're filling the streets instead of the cars, standing outside all the shops and the bars. Here's a fact that everyone should know. The wild goats are back on the streets of Llandudno. There's a storm from way up in Orme, and quite clearly, it's the appearance of all these Kashmiri, that's the official name for the goats, The breed of these creatures that very few could know. The wild goats are back on the streets of Llandudno. Hedges and bushes and flowers and leaves, nothing is safe from the munching of bees. Bees who are feasting on much more than wood, though. The wild goats are back on the streets of Llandudno. Not just the greenery, blossoms and plants, washing line thievery, dad's underpants, so much more than chewing the cud, though. The wild goats are back on the streets of Llandudno, invading the churches, the parks and the schools, not acting the goat that nobody's fools. Just check your shoes for where you've been stood, though. The wild goats are back on the streets of Llandudno, sowing wild oats, its natural selection. Thanks to COVID, no goat contraception. That's the official reason. Goat contraception is not a situation I want to be thinking about, or I'll put that in your mind now. I do apologise. Sowing wild oats, its natural selection. Thanks to COVID, no goat contraception. It could be a movie, not very good though. Return of the Goats to the Streets of Llandudno. From this book, Pig's Ear, Dog's Dinner, published by Flapjack Press, available from their website and my website as well.